Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that behind the flashing headlines and carefully polished narratives, there's a truth so powerful, so financially devastating that is being buried beneath silence? What if I told you that Israel, a nation often seen as an economic powerhouse, is quietly bleeding billions and almost no one is talking about it? This isn't just about war. This is about a country collapsing inward under the weight of its own choices. It's about broken industries, vanishing tourists, fleeing talent, and foreign aid that's slipping through its fingers. It's about the cracks behind the curtain, cracks that could change everything in the region and shake the global stage. You're not going to hear this on mainstream news. You won't find it in press releases. But today, right now, we're going to dive into the hidden story, the one that exposes the financial bleeding of a nation that claims strength but hides weakness. So, I invite you. Open your eyes. Hold your breath, and stay with me till the very end. Because, by the time we finish, you won't just see numbers, you'll see the truth behind them. And once you know, you can't unknow. Israel's war spending has reached unprecedented levels, plunging the nation into a financial strain that many refuse to acknowledge publicly. The ongoing conflict, particularly in the Gaza Strip, has created an insatiable appetite for military funding. Every missile launched, every ground operation initiated, every Iron Dome interception costs money. And not just a few million here and there, but billions upon billions of dollars over a short span. The defense budget has ballooned beyond sustainable levels, forcing the government to divert funds from crucial civilian sectors, healthcare, education, infrastructure. Each one is seeing massive cuts to feed the military machine. The state is burning its reserves to finance a prolonged war that has no visible end. Emergency economic packages are being passed, debt ceilings are being raised, and taxes are being debated. Still, the hemorrhaging continues. Beyond the obvious cost of weapons and defense systems, there are the hidden economic burden. The constant state of emergency means that thousands of reservists are pulled from their jobs, causing a massive slowdown in productivity. Across key sectors, manufacturing suffers. Agriculture takes a hit. Even the high-tech industry, Israel's pride, is seeing disruptions. Every day spent at war is another day the economy bleeds from lost labor and halted business. Security infrastructure is expensive, especially one as advanced as Israel's. The Iron Dome system, hailed for its effectiveness, comes at a steep price. Each interceptor missile costs around $40,000 to $100,000. In intense periods of rocket fire, the cost of just defending the cities can run into tens of millions within hours. Add to that the expense of intelligence operations, border surveillance, and rebuilding military equipment destroyed in combat, and the financial toll is staggering. There's also the cost of post-conflict rebuilding, something that's often left out of headlines. War devastates not just the enemy's land, but your own economy. Damaged roads, closed businesses, and shattered communities all need to be restored. This long-term economic trauma isn't measured in dollars immediately, but its impact is generational. The continuous funneling of resources into war without significant international scrutiny is creating an unsustainable fiscal path. While the world watches the explosions, few notice the implosion, an economy strained to the brink under the weight of endless militarization and unchecked defense expenditures. Israel's tourism sector, once a major pillar of its economy, has been crippled by ongoing conflict and global outrage. Historically, Israel attracted millions of tourists annually who came to visit its religious landmarks, historical sites, beaches, and vibrant cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Tourism brought in billions of dollars in revenue, supporting hundreds of thousands of jobs and boosting sectors like hospitality, retail, transportation, and local artisan industries. But with every missile strike, every air raid siren, and every international headline depicting war zones and civilian casualties, Israel's image as a travel destination deteriorates further. Tourists are cancelling trips. Travel advisories are being issued. Airlines are cutting routes. The flow of visitors that once brought life and money to the streets has been replaced by silence, empty hotels, and abandoned tour buses. So, this collapse is not just a short-term inconvenience. It's a long-term economic wound. International investors who once poured money into real estate, luxury hotels, cultural centers, and entertainment complexes are now hesitating or withdrawing entirely. Projects have stalled, funding has dried up, and confidence has eroded. The instability on the ground, combined with a growing international criticism of Israel's military actions, has created an atmosphere of uncertainty that no investor wants to touch. Financial institutions and development firms are quietly stepping back, shifting their attention to safer, less controversial regions. The economic ripple effects are vast, reaching beyond tourism into construction, finance, and even the Israeli tech scene. Moreover, cultural boycotts and the refusal of global artists to perform or exhibit in Israel are also striking a blow to the country's soft power and international branding. Global conferences, music festivals, and art exhibitions are being cancelled or relocated, further shrinking the opportunities for economic engagement and global image repair. The absence of tourism means the absence of cultural exchange, trade opportunities, and soft diplomacy, all of which affect the economy in ways that aren't immediately visible on a balance sheet, but are felt deeply in national morale and long-term strategic growth. The economic pain isn't just in the lost hotel bookings or shuttered restaurants, it's in the shattered perception of Israel as a safe, stable, and culturally rich destination. Once that image is broken on the world stage, rebuilding it takes years, sometimes decades. And in the meantime, the billions that once flowed in are now bleeding out. The boycott, divestment, sanctions, BDS movement has grown from a grassroots campaign into a powerful economic force, targeting Israel's financial and political standing on the global stage. What began as a call to pressure Israel over its policies in the occupied Palestinian territories has evolved into a worldwide effort that is directly impacting the country's economy. Multinational companies are being pushed to cut ties. Tech firms are facing divestment from ethical investment funds, and academic institutions are withdrawing from collaborative projects. These actions, while subtle in some cases, are adding up to serious economic pressure that few in mainstream media openly address. Global consumer brands are being targeted, and some are choosing to exit Israeli markets altogether to protect their public image. Every time a major corporation pulls out or pauses its operations, jobs are lost, supply chains are disrupted, and investor confidence dips. Beyond corporate decisions, the cultural and academic boycott are just as significant. Universities and student unions across Europe, North America, and even parts of Asia are passing resolutions to sever academic exchange and research partnerships with Israeli institutions. This has a long-term impact on innovation, funding for research, and Israel's ability to maintain its edge in technology and science. The BDS movement isn't just about denying Israel access to markets or cultural platforms, it's about isolating it from the kind of international collaboration that fuels modern economies. The tech sector, which Israel heavily relies on, is beginning to feel the heat as well. Venture capital firms and tech investors in Europe and the United States are facing pressure to avoid partnerships with Israeli startups. Some have already pulled funding or refused to engage, not necessarily because of political beliefs, but to avoid backlash and reputational risk. The movement is influencing the decisions of artists, influencers, athletes, and business leaders, creating a chilling effect on Israel's cultural diplomacy and economic outreach. Even Israeli exports, especially in agricultural and consumer goods, are being targeted with growing success in boycotts across retail chains. All this economic isolation does not happen with the noise of bombs or the coverage of breaking news. It happens quietly, steadily, and deliberately. It eats away at the economic foundation of the country from the outside in. As markets shrink and partnerships dissolve, Israel finds itself increasingly cut off from the global economic ecosystem it once thrived in, bleeding billions not through war, but through worldwide disapproval, turning into direct action. Israel is witnessing a growing brain drain crisis, a quiet yet devastating consequence of prolonged conflict, political instability, and societal disillusionment. Doctors, engineers, software developers, researchers, and entrepreneurs are leaving the country in increasing numbers, seeking stability, peace of mind, and professional opportunities abroad. The very people who once built Israel's innovation-driven economy are now packing up their talents and heading for countries with safer environments and more promising futures. This mass migration is not just a social issue. It's an economic alarm bell. Each highly skilled worker who leaves represents a significant loss in human capital, weakening industries, and reducing the country's long-term competitiveness on the global stage. Israel's tech industry, once nicknamed the startup nation, is especially vulnerable. Startups are struggling to retain top-tier talent, as developers and founders find it harder to secure funding or maintain operations in a country plagued by uncertainty. Investors, both local and foreign, are now hesitant to place bets in a market where the workforce is shrinking and morale is low. Many tech companies are relocating parts of their operations to Europe and North America, not only to attract funding, but to access a more stable talent pool. This shift means that even when innovation continues, the economic benefits, jobs, tax revenue, growth are being transferred out of Israel's borders. The healthcare sector is also being hit. Young medical graduates and experienced specialists are choosing to build their careers elsewhere due to burnout, inadequate support systems, and the constant shadow of national emergencies. This results in staff shortages, longer patient wait times, and reduced quality of care back home. Academia isn't spared either. Professors and researchers who depend on international collaboration and freedom of thought feel increasingly stifled and alienated, prompting many to accept offers from foreign institutions. Beyond the loss of talent, this brain drain signals a deeper emotional and psychological fracture within Israeli society. Many of those leaving aren't just chasing financial opportunities. They're fleeing what they perceive as a nation losing its moral and democratic compass. Their departure speaks volumes about the internal decay that economic reports cannot measure. As more minds and hearts walk away, the country loses not only the labor they offer, but the future they could have built. It's a slow bleed, but one with irreversible consequences if left unchecked. One of the most alarming economic threats facing Israel is the growing controversy surrounding foreign aid, particularly from the United States. For decades, Israel has relied heavily on U.S. support, receiving billions annually in military and economic assistance. This aid has been the backbone of its defense strategy, technological advancements, and geopolitical leverage, but in recent years, that foundation is starting to crack. A significant shift is occurring in American political discourse, especially among younger generations and progressive lawmakers who are increasingly questioning the unconditional nature of this support. What was once a guaranteed bipartisan consensus is now becoming a source of debate, scrutiny, and public pressure. As the humanitarian toll of the conflict in the Gaza Strip becomes more visible, calls to re-evaluate or even restrict aid to Israel are growing louder. Congressional hearings, grassroots campaigns, and international human rights reports are shining a harsh light on how U.S. taxpayer dollars are being used. This scrutiny is pushing influential members of the U.S. government to demand transparency, accountability, and in some cases, the redirection or suspension of aid. If these demands turn into policy changes, the financial consequences for Israel would be staggering. Losing even a fraction of that aid would force Israel to re-evaluate its military operations, technological programs, and social services, many of which are sustained by the cushion that U.S. support provides. Even the mere threat of reduced aid sends ripples through Israel's financial markets. Investors watch these political shifts closely, knowing that a drop in foreign aid could lead to higher national debt, increased taxes, and economic instability. The Israeli shekel reacts to headlines, and market confidence is shaken by the idea that the country may soon have to shoulder more of its defense and development burdens without American assistance. Furthermore, the perception of waning U.S. support weakens Israel's global standing. Allies begin to second-guess their own alliances, and adversaries feel emboldened. This geopolitical uncertainty adds another layer of economic risk. Foreign businesses, already cautious due to conflict and controversy, become even more hesitant to operate in a country whose strongest lifeline is now in question. The dependency on external financial aid, once seen as a strategic strength, is now turning into a vulnerability. As political tides shift in Washington and the world becomes more vocal about the ethics of funding conflict, Israel faces a future where bleeding billions is no longer a silent issue, but a loud reckoning driven by global accountability. Israel's economy is being increasingly paralyzed by internal political unrest that shows no sign of slowing down. Over the past few years, the country has been embroiled in a deep constitutional crisis, with nationwide protests erupting over controversial judicial reforms, growing authoritarian tendencies, and a loss of trust in leadership. These protests are not isolated events. They are massive, sustained, and deeply disruptive. Tens of thousands of people regularly take to the streets, blocking highways, shutting down airports, and halting business as usual in major cities. This level of civil unrest is shaking investor confidence, stalling government functionality, and damaging Israel's image as a stable and secure place to do business. International credit rating agencies have taken notice, issuing warnings and downgrades that signal rising economic risk. Internal division is more than just political. It is economic at its core. Businesses cannot function efficiently in an environment where civil disobedience and political uncertainty are part of daily life. Foreign investors hesitate to inject capital into a market where laws can change on a whim, where independent courts are being undermined, and where the rule of law itself feels under siege. Local entrepreneurs are moving operations abroad to shield themselves from the chaos. Venture capital is drying up. Tech IPOs are being postponed, and real estate transactions are declining as buyers lose faith in the country's long-term stability. Consumer behavior is also being affected. Israelis are spending less, saving more, and pulling money out of riskier investments. Inflation is on the rise, and the central bank is struggling to control a volatile economic environment made worse by political instability. Public services, already strained by budget diversions to defense and war spending, are suffering further as the political gridlock prevents meaningful economic reform or stimulus. Education, healthcare, transportation all are caught in a freeze as politicians remain too divided to act decisively. At the heart of this paralysis is a society increasingly split between ideologies with no clear path to reconciliation. When a nation turns inward to battle itself, the economic consequences ripple outward. Investors flee, citizens tighten their belts, and the gears of growth grind to a halt. In Israel's case, the image of a thriving tech powerhouse and economic miracle is fading under the weight of internal division, where political chaos isn't just a headline, it's a direct threat to national prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just uncovered is a truth many are too afraid to say out loud. Israel is bleeding billions not only from the cost of war, but from the cracks forming beneath its own foundation. A nation once hailed for innovation, resilience, and military might is now facing a quiet, financial implosion. War spending is devouring the national budget while schools and hospitals go underfunded. Tourism has collapsed into silence. Boycotts are no longer symbolic. Their financial weapons cause real damage. The brightest minds are fleeing. Foreign aid is under fire, and the internal chaos is shutting down the economy from the inside out. This isn't just about politics or borders anymore. It's about the survival of a state gripped by its own contradictions, and still most of the world looks away, blinded by propaganda, distracted by noise. But the numbers don't lie. The bleeding is real. The damage is deep. And if nothing changes, the collapse won't come with a bang. It'll come with silence. As industry fades, confidence breaks, and the world slowly walks away. Thank you for having the courage to listen to this truth. May your heart stay sharp, your mind stay open, and your voice never be silent in the face of injustice. Good luck and thank you.